Hello, my name is Deanna Byrne, and I'm a certified and accredited international life coach. My practice places a focus on mindset and limiting beliefs. I work with clients to define their goals and mindset shifts to help them live their most authentic life. I am also a widow. My husband died suddenly on January the 18th, 2020. Welcome to Chasing Sunsets, a video blog about overcoming some of the hardest obstacles life can place within our path. This episode is called No Regrets. Never wait until tomorrow. My late husband was an avid hiker. He always said nature was his church, and I remember he would come home looking so relaxed and balanced after a hike. And he would take our golden retriever, Sunny Boy, into the woods, and they would spend hours there. And they would find a perfect tree to sleep and sometimes just curl under into the moss and just lie there in the coolness, absorbing the energy of the forest. And so many times over the years, he would ask me to go. And I always had a reason to not go. I was so focused on building and chasing and running towards that next rainbow of success, jumping on a plane to spend 12 hours traveling for a 2-hour board meeting, layovers, hotels, airport food, on and on and on. My life was a series of chaotic running sessions, all for the greater good of securing a successful future. In 20 years with my husband, I may have gone on no more than 20 hikes with him. 20. When my husband took his last breath, I remember leaving the hospital and when the elevator door opened, there was this long hallway leading to the exit doors of the hospital. Walking that hallway to me felt like the scene in The Green Mile, where he was walking to be executed. It was a long, dark, and cold hallway, chilling, really. When I finally made it to the doors to exit the hospital, I remember walking out into the cold, brisk air, and it was so hard to take a deep breath. I couldn't breathe in. I got in my car, and on the passenger seat was his hat and a half-eaten yogurt cup, which would have been his last meal. My shaky hands started my car and I began to drive home. And the drive felt like time had stood still, literally. Nothing had changed. However, my whole world had changed. When I arrived at our home, Charlie, our little puppy, new golden retriever, met me at the door. She had been home alone with friends checking in on her. So I took her outside to pee when my neighbor came out to just say, "Hey, how's it going?" And all I could say was, "Terry is dead." That's all that could come out of my mouth. He is dead. We both stood there in silence for a few minutes. He didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. And those were the first of many moments of awkward silence that would now become far too familiar in my life. When I went back into the house, I stood in the porch and I noticed all of Terry's jackets, his boots, his hats, all placed exactly where he had left them. So I went into the kitchen and I just stood in front of the sink and I looked out of the window and I remember I started shaking and my breathing was so difficult. So I started crying and then I started screaming so loudly. There was so much anger coming out of my mouth and out of my body. And I remember holding onto the sink for support and to stop myself from falling onto the floor. When I was finally able to calm down, I could hear poor little Charlie crying in the porch. I found her lying next to Terry's boots, crying. I knew in that moment we only had each other, and we would forge our way forward to find our new normal, to find our own comfort, and to rewrite our own journey. Our future from yesterday was no longer valid. Having Charlie during the most intense parts of grieving for me saved me. She saved my life. It forced me to get up every single day It forced me to be responsible for someone other than my broken self. It made me accountable to someone. There was a small trail system in behind our camper where we had our camper at a campground. And when we opened up the trailer that May, I took her to the trail just for a run. And as I walked through the trail, I remember feeling this intense sense of comfort. The tall trees, the green moss, the sun peeking through the tops of the trees. We found a tree and we sat down in the moss and leaned up against the tree. And Charlie came right over to me and placed her head on my lap. We sat there looking around, just listening to the birds, feeling the cool ground beneath us. In that moment, I got it. I understood why he tried to push me so hard to head to nature. I needed to reset, to leave the stress of life behind me, and to allow nature to engulf my being in every fiber of my soul. And I cried. I cried because in that moment, I also realized how many times I had said no, how many excuses I always made. Those excuses lost time with him to just be together. Life can be a whirlwind of chaos and busyness, and we think that working ourselves to a point of having no time for self-care is needed to meet that expectation that we have placed on ourselves or have been placed on us by others. The unfortunate part of this thinking is that we may not have tomorrow. We don't always have it. We think we do. It is never promised, and when it is taken away, it will leave an unimaginable void of regret in your life and in your soul. I would then come across a quote that said, "Never put off today what you can do tomorrow." The loss of my husband made this so incredibly clear to me. He sat in our car eating yogurt, never finishing it, and then he died. We did not have tomorrow. Hiking is now a huge part of my life. Getting into nature and really feeling the energy of nature and being so grateful for it, allowing it to just reset me. There are days when every single muscle is on fire in my body and my brain is screaming to stop, and I keep putting one foot in front of the other because that is the only way we can ever move forward. I no longer regret not going with my husband on those hikes, those thousands of times, because I feel him walking alongside of us. I feel his energy and I hear his voice. And I have a comfort in knowing that he would simply say, "Deanna, you finally got it." Stop the spiraling insanity of busyness and take the time today. Make a list of those things that you want to do with those that you love and just go do them. The chaos and insanity will still be there tomorrow, I promise. It's time to put yourself first, to do those things that you dream of, to climb that mountain, to hike those trails, to paint that painting you've always wanted to paint. Whatever fills your soul cup. Tomorrow is never, ever promised, and I say that with absolute conviction.